In fact, being on time is one of the traits of a good leader.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. My point was maybe giving you more time.
Yeah, it's time, 10 o'clock in my watch.
A very good morning and welcome to AICTE sponsored DCP lecture on development of academic leadership strategy and nurturing academic leadership chain by Professor Premrat. I welcome each and every participant who have joined today for this session with the open heart. And I welcome Professor Premrat sir, who is the distinguished professor and a great academician who has great knowledge. And I think it is very true that today we are going to see a practical session of how leadership is being extended to the lecture. Dr. E. Sai Babareddy sir, Dr. A. Padmaja ma'am, our principal, all the faculty members and the academia from all over India who have joined today to this session. Knowledge is power and and definitely knowledge should be multiplied. And Professor Premrat has come here to deliver an excellent session on development of academic leadership strategy and nurturing leadership chain. So we are very honored, sir, and privileged to have you for the third session of AICTE sponsored DCP lecture series. So, sir, I would like to hand over the session to you so that we can learn from you and nurture this leadership chain.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Dr. Padmaja and all the participants who have joined in online to the third session of the AICTE Distinguished Chair Professor Scheme. The session that has been assigned to me for this morning is on the development of academic leadership strategy and nurturing the academic leadership chain. It's an extremely vital topic, primarily because leadership makes all the difference in the performance of an organization. Although the leader is, in number terms, is one, or maybe collective leadership might be few, but the impact it has on the organizational performance is enormous. And hence, this particular topic should be of relevance to those senior academic who are aspiring to be in the leadership position. Second important reason for the importance of this topic is that in academic context, the formal training in the leadership amongst academic members of the faculty members is normally not given. And therefore, you come across many times a person who has been an outstanding professor or a researcher from a lab, and suddenly he has an opportunity to head an institution without any formal background, and at many times not even he has not come through a process of change. That's why I like the idea in this topic is nurturing the academic leadership chain. Because if you've gone through that academic leadership chain, then such a situation would not obtain, that a person suddenly from the research lab, without any background of leading the organization, occupies a position. And the reason for that is simple, that for every position, the skill sets required are different. For example, for an outstanding researcher or an outstanding professor, the skill sets required are different. But if you want to become an outstanding vice chancellor or outstanding principal or director or head of the institution, of course, in the context of academic institution, that basic trait of being an outstanding academic is prerequisite. Unless you're an outstanding academician, a great professor, is unlikely that you would become a great leader too. But a great professor need not necessarily be an outstanding leader, because the skill sets required are different. That's the fundamental point I wish to build in here. And therefore, what in the process of nurturing academic leadership chain, if those people are outstanding academicians and having promise of tremendous performance and very respected teachers, great researchers, and positive people, all those traits of leadership are in them, it's necessary to nurture them in the process, so that whenever their turn comes to become the head of the institution, all the skill sets required to even succeed at that level. Because as I mentioned earlier, the skill sets required in a great researcher may be quite, although it will be required in a great, because to me, I do believe that the difference between academic leadership and the rest of the leadership elsewhere is, and that's my perception, I have lived that value all through my life, that in addition to be a great academic leader, you have to continue to be a great academician, which means that even if you are a vice chancellor or a director or a principal, you must not leave teaching or research as an important component, because you then become a playing captain. And in fact, since I've practiced this in my entire life, in all through, in fact, I have more than nearly every possible position that I was fortunate enough to occupy in IIT Delhi, starting from professor, head, dean, deputy director, officiating director, then the founder director of IIT Roorkee, then vice chancellor of Technical University, vice chancellor ITM University, and now pro chancellor. One common thing in this is that till date, I have not given up teaching. Even now, I take a full course in my university where I am pro chancellor. I'm an honorary professor in IIT Delhi. I still teach there in IIT Delhi, and of course now AICTE distinct chair professorship. And therefore, what distinguishes an academic leadership from maybe the leadership in other contexts is that you have to continue to remain a playing captain. Because if you continue to excel in your own basic fundamental area and still then continue, because your performance then becomes a signal in inspiring the younger generation of people who are looking towards you, that without eroding your academic role, you continue to inspire a large number of people. And therefore, to that extent, nurturing academic leadership is fairly different. And therefore, second point I wish to share why this topic should be important, that it has been seen that this is one area where people occupy the position many times without a proper background or training or experience. And there I'd like to share with you a small empirical study that was done by my research team maybe about 7-8 years back. It may be slightly outdated, but the basic concept remains the same. We just wanted to know, in many of the AICTE approved institutions, what are those enablers of quality? What makes an institution great? enablers of, and we identified 9 enablers of enhancing the quality of a technical institution. And amongst these 9 enablers, in the order of their priority, as it should be, the topmost priority was the quality of faculty. And this is important because if you have a great quality faculty, the academic leadership would only emerge from them. So indirectly, it also means a basic prerequisite. An outstanding quality of faculty is the most important enabler, followed by a quality teaching learning process. And the third important enabler was the quality of academic leadership. And fourth was the quality of students. And of course, apart from the 9. Now, this is how it ought to be. It's an obviously sample-based, questionnaire-based response has its own limitations of any statistical analysis, which means that the quality of academic leadership is amongst the topmost prerequisites of developing academic excellence in an institution. But then we found what is actually happening on ground, and this study had two components. One is what should be the priority of the enablers, and the other is what is the actual ground reality of the institutions working. And I think, if I remember correctly, it was a sample size of about 121. A technical institution sample survey was done, and it was found that unfortunately the both quality of faculty and quality of academic leadership do not find a very prominent priority amongst institutions. Many times we found that the topmost priority goes into the physical infrastructure of buildings and other things. And academic leadership quality perhaps does not find that high priority ranking as this sample, which means that critical that in order to shine in academic institutions as a great institution, you need to nurture the quality of academic leadership, because many times it has been, the sample shows it's not the case. And it's in that context that you should be able to. And fortunately, in fact, the Ministry of Education, or that time MHRD, realized this lacuna of not having adequate preparation of the leadership and management styles amongst academicians who suddenly find themselves in a role very quite different from the role of an exclusive teacher only. They started a scheme which was acronymed as LEAP. LEAP, L-E-A-P. LEAP is Leadership for Academic Professionals. Leadership for Academic Professionals is a very powerful scheme. I think they're about to started in few chosen IITs. IIT Roorkee was the first one. I had an opportunity to deliver lectures in that. Then IIT BHU again had two. So this scheme was great, where 30 topmost potential faculty members, senior faculty members, who have the potential to rise to the level of being an IT director or being a vice chancellor of a university or state or central university. They were chosen in a competitive scheme, 30 people, and they were given 3 weeks of leadership training in one of these IITs that I was mentioning. And the entire cost of developing them was borne by the Ministry of Education, MHRD. And this scheme, in fact, became very popular. And I still remember some of the people who eventually have become IT directors, and in fact were participants to that scheme, where the entire cost was borne by and the scheme had 2 weeks of training in an IIT and 1 week of training in one of the topmost foreign university. For example, maybe the IIT Roorkee has a collaboration with a top-notch American university, University of Cambridge, and then National University of Singapore or Nanyang Technical University. The whole idea was to also give them an exposure about the best practices that take place outside India in some of the top-notch institutions. And apparently, it seems that the feedback given there, that scheme was found to be successful. But since it was a very expensive scheme, it could not be expanded. But maybe one can take cue from that, and either the state governments or maybe even an institution concerned on its own initiative, confined to only the institution in which you are working, to nurture leadership chain, can identify faculty members early in time who have the potential to shine as a top leader, and you then invest in them, in nurturing in them the leadership skills. Therefore, to me, it makes it important to delve on this topic, because it's extremely important for a organization to grow under an able leadership. B, in academic context, the preparation that many times the head of the institution, they may be good in their technical subject, they may be very good in research publications, but the kind of skill required in managing people, managing the entire stakeholders, which that's what the head of the institution looks at it, perhaps need to be given in. This being the background, now the overall structure of my paper presentation would be, initially, since I'm presuming a diverse background of people who might not have been exposed to the basic theoretical underpinnings of leadership, I'll first give you an overview of that, and later on, maybe I'll share my own the experience of some of the important experiences sharing. But let me also mention that I'll be more happy in case the organizers feel to make it more interactive session, and would be able to respond to the queries of the potential leaders or budding the academic heads of the institution who might be listening to my program, as the case may be. So initially, the basic theoretical background of what constitutes a leader, because some of the traits of a leadership are common to whether you are in an academic institution or elsewhere. But there's a very powerful theory of leadership known as contingency theory of leadership, which means that the style of managing an institution or the style of leading an institution or an organization is contingent upon the situation. Therefore, the way you lead an academic institution may be quite different from the way you lead a defense organization, or the way you lead an administrative institution, or the way you manage a transport corporation, and so on and so forth. And therefore, this contingency theory of leadership says that no two styles of leadership can be transplanted from one situation. Given your situation, and therefore the academic institution should actually identify the key characteristics of what constitutes an academic system, and for managing that academic institution, what is the right style of leadership that should in fact emerge. That's a contingency theory that I'll be talking about. So there is no single best way of managing every organization. That's what the contingency theory says. The right style of managing and the right leadership style is contingent upon that situation. And therefore, it's a situational theory of management that we'll be talking about. With this background, let me now begin with my presentation, and maybe hopefully are able to see the slide mode.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, therefore, let's first, and as I mentioned in the beginning, I'll talk about the basics, presuming that it's a diverse background. And in any case, those of you are aware, may still may be useful to know this. For example, first fundamental question is, what do you mean by a leader? Actually, there are a hierarchy of three concepts: an administrator, a leader, a manager, and a leader. Many times, people think that if you're an administrator, then you're a leader. In fact, administrator is the lowest form of leadership. A manager has to be a good administrator plus something more, and a leader has to be a good manager and a good administrator plus something more. And therefore, it's basically a nurturing of from administrator to a manager to a leader. And therefore, what constitutes leadership? Who is a leader? Leader is someone who can influence others and who has managerial authority. That means the person who has a legal, rational authority of taking decisions, and he has a power to influence others. And therefore, ideally speaking, as I mentioned earlier, ideally speaking, all managers should ideally be leaders, because if you're a leader, you have to be a good manager too. But being a good manager does not guarantee to be a good leader. Being a good administrator does not guarantee to be a good leader. And therefore, At the same time, not all leaders have the ability to be effective manager. That's where you find that perhaps in the concept of thought leadership. A person may be very powerful thought leader in thinking out of box and think a visionary leadership, finding out future directions. But when it comes to specifically managing a given situation, he or she may not be that effective. And therefore, as a leader, but if you look at the definition of this leader, someone who can influence others and has managerial authority to make decisions. If you take this definition in a broader context, even every teacher, in a sense, is a leader, because in the classroom, as a teacher, as a professor, you are someone who can influence others, in this case, you're a student. And primarily, the inspirational role of a teacher is to inspire the class, and therefore, indirectly, in a very generic sense, every teacher has a potential leader in him or her. And particularly in the context of academic leadership chain, since the basic traits of leading is present in every teacher, it's just a question of honing up some of the important managerial skills that are required and nurturing some of the leadership traits that are important. And therefore, almost if you take in that sense, the leadership spectrum in an academic institution can be fairly wide. Right from the head of the department to the dean, the director, the principal, and vice chancellor, all come within the domain of academic leadership. And particularly the concept of academic leadership chain that the topic is, I was very happy with this topic. And many times, if this structure is taken, that you train people go through the academic leadership chain, and if they succeed in every level, that means if a person is an outstanding professor, becomes a head of the department, and he succeeds in being an outstanding head of the department, he becomes a dean. If he succeeds in becoming an outstanding dean, he becomes a deputy director or vice chancellor or vice principal. And if he succeeds in that role, he then becomes a director, principal, or vice chancellor. That way, you are actually trying a person on every possible ladder of the leadership chain, and therefore only when people succeed in their respective role within the domain in which they're supposed to lead, perhaps they would have honed their leadership skills at managing the entire organization at a high level, because the spectrum of your catchment area increases, you go up. And therefore, now the leadership, indeed, if you look at the process, leadership is a process of influencing a group towards the achievement of goals. After all, every organization has a purpose, has a goals to be accomplished. And therefore, the process of influencing a group of people towards achievement of those goals is indeed the process of academic leadership. Now, there have been huge amount of topics. Of those of you maybe with management background would know that problem area in management has been so much extensively researched as leadership. But then some of the very important contemporary theory of leadership is situational leadership theory or contingency theory. What it says that the right style of leadership depends on, that means maybe managing a private institution, managing a government institution, managing an IIT, managing an IIM, or managing a particular state, and so different. So, and therefore, there are primarily 4 types of leadership styles defined by 2 dimensions. These styles are telling. Telling is almost like one-way communication. The leader defines roles and tells people how to do their job. People are neither competent nor confident, and therefore this is one way. The director or the principal tells you what is to be done, and that's it. Perhaps it's not one of the best form of managing a great institution. Selling is leader is both directive and supportive. Selling the idea, if you have a brilliant idea, instead of thrusting down the subordinates that this is what is to be done, telling them what to do, what not to do. Selling the idea, trying to persuade, so indirectly you're trying to support and also be directive. Third style is participating, where a leader and follower make decisions together. Now, academic leadership, particularly, in my personal view, is a participative style of leadership. It's managing a team is a coordinative style of leadership where a leader is one amongst the equals. For example, if the head of the department is one amongst the professors who are there in the department, a principal or a director is one amongst the professors of the institution, and therefore the coordinative type of leadership is a participative style of leadership where leaders and followers make decisions jointly through different forums that exist or should need to be created. And this indeed is an important. And finally, delegating. Delegating is leadership, is the highest form of and please, leader provides the directions. Okay, the overall directions are given. This is particularly true at the level of a large university vice chancellor, where micromanagement of the departments is neither feasible nor desirable. Therefore, an overall policy directions are given, and within those policy directions, people are delegated the responsibility and authority to do a job. And therefore, the quality of academic leadership perhaps would go in that order. Directing people to do certain things and that's it, no debate, is perhaps the lowest form of academic leadership. And the highest form would be where you're competent people. Now you can see that delegating would be only a successful possibility if people down the line are competent. Because if you delegate the power to people who are not competent, perhaps you may not be able to achieve your goal, because ultimately the purpose of leadership is to accomplish your goals, to accomplish your objectives, and every organization being a purposive system. If you're not able to achieve your goals, then perhaps you can't say you're an effective leader. Achieving those goals is critical, and in that process, whichever style helps you depends upon. For example, if people are neither confident or nor competent to do their job, perhaps there is no other option other than telling them what to do. Therefore, if you do not hire outstanding quality faculty who are not either competent or confident in doing what they are supposed to do, maybe the style of leadership has to be telling them what to do. People are unable but willing to do the job. They have the capability. They're willing to do the job, but are not capable. That means there's a quality is missing, but desire to perform is depending upon those situations. Now, there are two basic fundamental differences in leadership. One is called transactional leadership, and the other one is called transformational leadership. Now, transactional leadership is more like an administrator. Leaders who guide or motivate their followers in the direction established goals by clarifying the rules and task requirements. So you define the processes, the rules, the policies, and tell them, motivate them, guide them to follow the rules and norms. That's transactional leadership. It's required. But transactional leadership is more like an administrator. You follow the norms, because administrative theory of management, the bureaucratic theory of management, Max Weber's theory says that this style of leadership is rule-based system. You have systems and processes and rules, and you follow those systems and rules in an impersonal manner to transact your business. Now, transactional leader may not be able to achieve outstanding accomplishments. And therefore, what you require is a transformational leader, particularly in the context of academic system, because in the academic systems, you are managing knowledge workers. Both students and faculty all are knowledge workers. Now, knowledge has enormous potential, and many of us, even the most active researchers and academicians, have enormous potential. They have, so since the main purpose of academic institution is to inspire people to realize their hidden potential, sky's the limit for growth. Hence, a transformational leadership, which is more inspirational in nature, is perhaps can do the difference. And therefore, a transformational leadership inspire followers to transcend their own self-interest for the good of the entire organization. And therefore, they're primarily outstanding inspirers. And such people are capable of having profound effect on followers. They pay attention to the concern of the followers, because unless you look after the interest of the followers, you cannot expect them to be with you on the same page. They change the followers awareness of the issues involved. It's the job of the transformation leader to also guide them, define them, make them aware of the issues involved, excite and inspire followers to put forth their extra effort, because unless people are inspired to put in an extra effort, because what actually require and a transformational leadership has the capacity to get extraordinary performance from seemingly ordinary people. Note this point: extraordinary output from seemingly ordinary people, because seemingly ordinary people are those who have not realized their hidden potential. And the role of a transformational leader to inspire them to realize the hidden potential in them, and therefore from seemingly ordinary people you're able to get outstanding and therefore that role of transformational leadership is to excite and inspire followers to put forth that extra effort that's required, because from ordinary to extraordinary you require that a bit of that extra effort. That's what the extraordinary, and built on top of transactional leadership. Now this is a fundamental question. Now people might say that transactional and transformational leadership are these are either or. No, I mean, you may be a great inspiring leader, but you have to also ensure that you are able to accomplish your goals by remaining within the rules and policies and systems, by following the processes. And therefore the transformational leadership quality has to be built on the module of transactional leadership, because as I mentioned, the transactional leadership is doing things as per rules, almost like administrative processes. But then the impersonal nature in transactional leadership may not inspire people, and therefore this transformational leadership is not a substitute of being transactional. You build on it. The basic module is transactional, but build on that basic module or transactional, the transformational leadership, so that by remaining transactional leader, by following the rules and processes efficiently, you may be efficient, but being a transformational leader will be not only efficient, you'll also be effective. And effectiveness of a leader is accomplishment of your goals. Efficiency is only following the rules and processes and optimizing on the resources. And therefore, a transformational leadership would be both efficient and effective only when he or she is also transactional leader. And therefore, there is adequate evidence of the superiority of this type of leadership. And therefore, in academic institutions, primarily, we should be able to aim at either selecting people in those roles when you're choosing a head of the institution or vice chancellor or head of the department or whatever level. Aim should be to identify the skill sets who has the transformational leadership skill with the capacity to inspire. And that's why I'm saying every teacher has that role, because as a teacher, your major role of a teacher, particularly in the information age, is I often say the role is an IIT: involve, inspire, and transform. So every teacher has an inspirational role, and that's why there's a leadership hidden in every teacher. All that you need to do is to develop by conducting programs, nurturing them through, or give them responsibilities at a lower level. And if they succeed at that level, then they become identified with the higher level. Then I'll be sharing later on. Another way to look at the leadership is charismatic versus visionary leadership. It's a term which is very extensively used and talked about. A charismatic leader is very enthusiastic, a self-confident leader whose personality and actions influence people. In fact, often say that the very presence of that charismatic leader amongst the people who looks self-confident, very enthusiastic, absolutely positive, and a personality profile, because of the charismatic nature, is able to, the very presence itself might influence people. Such a style of leader, such a leader is charismatic leadership. He or she can articulate a vision for which he or she is willing to take a risk. And therefore, a charismatic leader is a very good articulate person, because unless you are able to communicate to your people whom you are leading, because in the entire theory of management or leadership, there are three situational variables: the leader, the lad, and the situation. And therefore, unless you're able to articulate your vision, your point of view with the people whom you are trying to influence or inspire, you may not be able to achieve the goal. And also, secondly, given particularly, I'll talk about it when I talk the VUCA business environment. Today's business environment is becoming increasingly unpredictable, very, very uncertain, very risky. And therefore, a good charismatic leader should also be willing to take a calculated risk of being wrong, because unless you're able to take a risk of being wrong with best of the intention, because since situation is uncertain, even with the best of conditions and situations, you may not always be right. And therefore, while you are able to articulate a vision very effectively, but given the uncertainties of the situation in which you are required to take a decision, you should be willing to take that risk, sensitive to the environmental constraints and follower needs, exhibit behaviors that are out of ordinary. You cannot be an ordinary person and still lead. To be a leader, you have to be extraordinary. That means out of ordinary, so that you also develop those ordinary people also skills. And therefore, a great leader is one who develops a leadership chain. And many times it doesn't happen. In fact, what happens that there is a sudden vacuum of leadership, even in fairly great institutions. You had a great inspiring leadership, and once he or she retires, there is a sudden vacuum, because we have not nurtured the younger generation of leadership who could eventually take over. And that's why one of the important outcomes or deliverables of a good leader is to develop a great quality of leadership in the chain. That's why I particularly like that topic that you had given. Charismatic leadership correlated very high. It has been found that with charismatic leadership, there's a very high degree of job performance. The institutions are able to accomplish their goals very, very effectively. And amongst the followers, because in fact, you read the followers or subordinates or whatever you name you give them, or those who are being led by you, leader led, there's a huge degree of satisfaction. And therefore, that basic conflict that the conventional theories talked about, that if you ask people to perform, their morale will come down, it's not true. It's possible for people to be happy and yet achieve great heights of performance. And this is where a charismatic leader can do that. And perhaps leadership, charismatic leadership, trained people can be trained. Because many times people see that leaders are to be born and you can't be trained. It's possible, and that's why otherwise there's no relevance for a lecture of this kind. Then transactional leaders are those who guide and motivate their followers in this direction. Now, okay, and I went there. Now, visionary leader, charismatic versus visionary. Now, visionary leader have the ability to create and articulate a realistic, credible, and attractive vision. Their thought leadership, they in fact are able to see what kind of scenario would obtain 10 years from now. That's what a vision is. And therefore, visionary leaders are able to present a clear and compelling imagery that inspires enthusiasm to pursue. You can see what kind of institution, what kind of a college or a university you wish to become. An autonomous institution, you should become a university, or you wish to be in the best institution, AICT institutions in let's say Telangana, or wherever you're located. Now you create a vision, what 5 or 10 years like to be. That's a visionary leadership. That requires thought leadership. You present a very clear and compelling imagery that people get inspired through that enthusiasm and pursue that organizational goal. People must believe that that vision is attainable. Now, that's very important. Many times when we write vision statements, it has seemed to have become a fashion now. Write down something, pick up from the best possible institutions, the most superlative statements, and you incorporate in your vision. Vision statement, unless it's believed by the people who are instrumental in realizing it, and unless these are realizable, perhaps won't do. And therefore, people must believe that whatever vision as a leader you are portraying before them is attainable. If you want to become the best technical institution in your state, people must believe, your faculty, your staff, your students must believe that this is realizable, is attainable. And therefore, visionary leaders have the ability to explain the vision to others, express the vision verbally and behaviorally, apply the vision to different leadership contexts. Now, a question would arise. I've given you 4 types: transformation, transactional, transformational, charismatic, visionary. Now, these are 4 traits that you see. Now, one would wonder as to which is the one. Ideally speaking, all the four in it, because a visionary leader, if he is also charismatic, can plays a major role in getting that vision realized. A transformational leader is also transactional. That means, for example, if the file doesn't wait even for a day at the vice chancellor stable, or the directors or principal stable, or HOD stable, or dean stable, whosoever, if that means you demonstrate that you are efficient. They put transactional built on transformational leadership built on transactional, and charismatic leader combined with visionary leadership. If you have all these four traits together, absolutely are designed for success. That's the way that I look at it. Now, in academic settings, particularly, as I mentioned even earlier, there's a greater need for team leadership. Because as I mentioned again, an academic leadership is a coordinative type of leadership. You are one amongst equals. That's why in a great academic institution, the hierarchy perhaps does not have much meaning. Respect will be there for everyone, but hierarchy, where rigid hierarchy, perhaps will not be able to explore the greatest potential in them, because you basically all are essentially comparable people. All faculty members are doing comparable job, and all students in the class have been chosen on a certain merit, and therefore idea is that since we are one amongst a leader is one amongst equal. A professor is fortunate enough to become the director of a college or a principal of a college, does not should not forget that he or she is one amongst the equals that she's leading, and therefore this coordinative type of leadership has to be team leadership. This is where perhaps a major difference in academic leadership, that you have to manage the leadership, the team leadership or collective leadership. This team leadership could be based on a team for a given academic project that you are given, or the team comprising the HODs constitutes your consultative group of the vice chancellor and principal. All those or dean's committee for giving directions or advice to the vice chancellor. All these are essentially team leadership concepts, where role of a team leader is different from the traditional. So conventional leadership style is so different, and academic leadership, in my opinion, is more like a team leadership, and it requires skill sets such as patience to share information, ability to trust others and give up authority, because authoritative academic leadership is unlikely to be a team leader, unlikely to be a visionary leader, unlikely to be a transformation leader. And therefore, patience to share information, ability to trust others and give up authority, and understanding when to intervene, because essentially team leadership is management by exception. People are assigned certain roles, teams are given their responsibilities. You create a nurturing environment, pick up the right members of your team, create an inspiring environment, and do not intervene. Micromanagement by the top leadership to the individual departments or teams or divisions or groups or subject matters. Micromanagement is not a great concept in team leadership, because you have to trust your people, build a great team, create an environment which is enabling, and let them perform. And when you do, you intervene when you need to. And therefore, this is called management by exception basis. Every time you do not have to say, okay, report to me every 2 hours, what have you done? That's not the way to create a right environment, and putting a large number of unattainable goals and say, okay, tell me what have you attained today. Now, team leader's job focuses on managing the team's external boundaries. Now, this is a major point, and I think fits in very well. Primarily, the role of the head of the institution, the principal, the director, or the vice chancellor, is managing the team's external boundaries. Now, as you know that there are in the management parlance, we call it significant others. There are very large number of stakeholders that they're not part of your institution, but they impact your performance. They are known as significant others, or the external stakeholders. Primarily, the head of the institution has a greater role in managing the team's external boundaries, but create an internal mechanism and systems and processes in facilitating the teams to perform, so that they are not waiting for the instructions from the person at the top. So create a facilitating, nurturing environment internal to the organization, but primarily focusing on managing the stakeholders external. Now, therefore, there are four. Maybe this can be with Now these are, that means as a head of, and this, as I mentioned, that this is where the team leadership might be a very fitting role to an academic leadership. Liaison with external constituencies. This could be our external stakeholders, which could be your regulators like AICT, UGC, state government, the Ministry of Technical Education, maybe the external, the parents and the society and the location in which you are involved, the students' parents. All those are important stakeholders. Liaising with the external constituencies, then working as a coach. Coach is nurturing people, developing them. Troubleshooter, identify problems, sources of problems, cause of the, because if you want to manage conflict, you must identify the source of the conflict, and therefore, and also manage as conflict manager. Now, conflict manager, and that's why conflict management is also very important issue. The best form of conflict management, because as head of the institution, obviously you would come across conflicts of various kinds, is to remove the cause of the conflict. Because conflict is only a symptom of a problem. Unless you get down to the root cause of the problem and remove that root cause, conflict would be short-lived management. For example, win-lose strategy in managing conflict is not a very sustainable strategy. If one party wins and the other person loses, it's not a very sustainable. It's a win-win proposition. By removing the cause of the conflict is permanently resolved. So that nobody should feel that one is a loser in that game, because win-lose is not a very sustainable conflict management. And therefore, as a result, as a conflict manager, you need to since leaders must have powers, how do they get that power? There are 5 sources of power. Legitimate authority associated with the position. If you're a principal, you get certain legitimate. This is called legal rational authority in bureaucratic management style. By virtue of sitting in that position, irrespective of your own personality profile, you automatically get that power. Whosoever becomes a vice chancellor, irrespective of one's own personality profile, those powers automatically come to you. That's your source of being a leader, but it's a legitimate source. Another could be coercive. Coercive is that your ability to punish or control followers. People, you demonstrate that coercion or fear. That if you don't, your followers react out of fear. And the coercive style of leadership is perhaps not a great style. I'll show you later on. Reward scheme, ability to give positive benefits, positive motivation. In fact, this is one, for example, if you inspire performers by giving a positive motivation, by rewarding the people who are performing very well, and only guiding and nurturing the people who are not able to achieve so much well. It's called management by objectives, MBO. Perhaps this would work. Now, expert is called sapiential authority. People respect you as a leader because you have superior power, superior knowledge. You are an expert. You are able to influence based on their special skills and knowledge of the subject that you have. And referent sources arises because of a person's desirable resources or personal traits, leads to admiration and desire to be like that person. You become a role model. So, for example, one of the a role model leadership is that you identify a role model and you decide to be like him or her. Now, 2 important requirements of a good leader would be credibility and trust. To create a culture of trust, you require credibility. Now, these are very important, although these are important in other forms of leadership too, but they're equally important in academic leadership. The credibility is honesty, competence, and ability to inspire. Honesty is the number 1 characteristics of admired leaders. And trust, belief in the integrity, character, and ability of the leader. Confident that rights and interests will not be abused. Important for empowering subordinates. Must trust employees to use their new authority. For example, the trust is what needs to be built amongst every level, particularly in those people who are nurturing in the academic leadership supply chain. And these are the traits that you must find in potential leaders while choosing them into for nurturing in an academic leadership train, because these characteristics are almost universal for every good leader, including in academic leadership train. and trends towards expanding non-authority relationship within and between. Now, this is the what if in fact if you do not exercise your authority explicitly, and you inspire people by building trust relationships, perhaps you are able to widen the acceptance zone. And therefore, what builds that trust? There are some simple, tips for developing trust in an organization. Because if you cannot build a trust in your organization, you're unlikely to be an outstanding academic leader. Be fair. Being fair is one of the most important. Fair in selecting your people, fair in promotions, fair in compensation, fair in all the dealings, and therefore if you are fair and people being led by you perceive you to be fair, half of your problems would vanish. And fair is being consistent about your own values and practices. Speak your feelings. It's not that you don't speak your mind, speak your feeling. Tell the truth. Show consistency. In fact, one of the biggest problems of conflict that arise in the organization is the inconsistency of the leader. Somewhere he or she is unusually strict, and elsewhere is unusually liberal. It is this inconsistency in decision making. Somewhere you are very particular about a particular achievement level, elsewhere you say never mind. Therefore, that consistency of your actions is one of the important ingredient in building the trust. Fulfill your promises. In fact, I often say a good leader would under promise but over deliver. So don't over promise which you cannot fulfill. Under promise but over deliver. And whatever promises you have made, you must deliver to maintain trust of people, maintain confidences. For example, if there are issues involved, there are personal issues involved with the people that you're leading, perhaps you have to respect those personal confidentiality of people. Demonstrate competence. That means demonstrate that whatever role you have been given, you yourself are efficient and competent in performing that role. Now, if your own role is not, for example, if files in the Vice Chancellor office are pending for months together, are not being cleared, and then we give very lofty talks in being fair, punctual, efficient, etc., it won't go, because people who have a wider, leaders who have a greater role of wider zone of acceptance, because the theory is very specific. People who accept you as a leader genuinely and voluntarily are able to get influenced by you more easily. And this can only happen that people perceive you to be competent in your own level of performance, and practice openness. In the name of confidentiality, and your opaque systems, people don't know on what basis people are being promoted, on what basis people are being compensated. So practice openness or transparency. So if you practice openness, be fair, speak your feelings, tell the truth, show consistency, fulfill your promises, maintain confidences, and demonstrate competence, I'm sure you'll create an environment of trust. And if that happens, you build a great degree of organization culture. I would perhaps now this is a way of and therefore great leaders develop great organization culture. Now coming to specific to the concept of academic excellence and the kind of academic leadership skills required, and so the practices I mentioned that that perhaps I may narrate with you, since at every level I was lucky enough to have been, although without losing teaching. I'm teaching in IIT Delhi now. I started on 9th August 1968 as a lecturer in mechanical engineering, and I still teach there as an honorary professor in the department. I have my office there. 55 years of association in teaching and research, and in addition to do this, I'm then handling the other responsibilities. So it means that you have to be a playing captain. Now, given that background, what are the core values of academic excellence? Because the whole idea of leadership is to inspire your followers to realize their hidden potential to achieve academic excellence. What are those core values of academic excellence? That burning ambition for excellence and achievement. Unless the leader of the institution has that burning ambition, because laid back approach would not work. If you're unconcerned about means if you're laid back, if you're indifferent, if you're not enthusiastic, if you're not excited about the role that you're performing, or you feel exhausted, you feel tired out, you are unlikely to. And this applies to a teacher. For example, as I mentioned, now this is my 55th year of teaching. Normally, people get exhausted in teaching. They're tired out of teaching. They feel, oh, it's very boring. But my enthusiasm is as fresh as it was in 1968 when I started my teaching career at IIT Delhi. So therefore, that burning ambition to excel in whatever you do. If you're a teacher, the burning ambition to excel in your teaching. If you're a researcher, a burning desire to excel in research and achieving whatever is expected. And as a head of the institution, that burning ambition for excellence and achievement is a core value required for excellence. And the second important point here is commitment of the leader. In fact, there are two prerequisites for academic excellence: the sincerity and commitment to the goals of excellence by the top leadership. That's why, as I mentioned, the third topmost enabler of academic excellence is leadership quality. Sincerity and commitment to goals of excellence by top leadership of the institution, and the quality of people that you employ, which is the quality of faculty that I mentioned. And therefore, if these two things are present, that means you have an outstanding quality faculty and the sincere commitment of the top leadership of the institution in achieving the goals of accomplished excellence. If these two things are present, nobody can stop you from achieving academic excellence, because these two prerequisites would ensure that you make right policies. If the faculty members are very talented, they will form right kind of curriculum. They will have right policies, right examination system, right way of evaluating people, right student feedback system, and all that goes with it. Right performance appraisal system, if sincere commitment, and therefore these two things are present, you'll be able to circumvent constraints of resources. You'll be able to find resources. People who believe in the sincerity of your commitment to the academic leadership and the quality of people in your organization would come forward in funding you. Your alumni will come forward in funding you. Your industry will come forward and giving you projects. The society will come and help you in your corporate social responsibility. And therefore, if these two things are present, perhaps the rest of the constraints or resources, financial crunch can be taken care of. But if these two things are missing, you'll find reasons for not becoming excellent. You'll be able to explain why you're not developing, but you not develop. You'll find reasons and excuses for not developing. And that's why if you really want to excel, this is what you require. And therefore, four commonalities that a leader, in order to achieve that organizational excellence, should have. These are basic pillars of prerequisites. Customer orientation. Now, customer orientation is whatever decisions you do as head of the institution or the head of the department or dean, you identify a customer. Who are your customers? Your immediate customers are your students. An organization exists because of the students, and your ultimate customers are the society and the employers. And therefore, whatever decisions you make at the organization level, never lose track of the fact that whatever decisions, whatever curriculum, whatever delivery mechanism, whatever policies you're making, the utmost in your mind should be the people you serve as your customers, employers, society, government, and the students, your immediate customer. So never do something which is not in the interest of your students or your employers or the society. Second important prerequisite of a good leader is management by facts. Data-driven decision making, not by perceptions and whims and fancies. If you manage on whims and fancies and hearsays and impressions and perceptions, perception may not be reality. And therefore, if you management by facts, reality and perception would come together. Perception and reality would be the same. Otherwise, it may not be the same. Employee involvement is extremely important for academic leadership. If however brilliant and sincere and efficient a head of the institution may be, unless you involve the entire faculty, entire staff in achieving that organizational excellence, because simply involving, spending all the 24 hours in say that I'm spending so many hours, 18 hours, 20 hours, but not involving others, you may not achieve, because there's a limit up to which way you can do. And therefore, a critical prerequisite for a great academic leader is involve your people, involve your faculty. And if you involve them in, and the word involvement is important. Involvement is not participation. Many times in the involvement of, in the name of involvement, we simply expect them to be party to the decision we make. That you hold a meeting, tell them what you want, and everybody says yes, the matter is over. That's not involvement. That's participation. Involvement is more proactive. Participation, but pride in doing what you're doing, and you feel enthusiastic about what you're doing. So a degree of enthusiasm, pride in what you're doing, then you become self-driven. So if you're able to create an environment as a great leader, that every employee feels involved in achieving or is a partner in that progress of academic excellence. So employee involvement is an important requirement of, and of course, transparency, complete transparency of whatever, those are personal information, that's, and anything that's beyond the, so your systems and processes and people must be able to know. Now, as I mentioned, that unfortunately, the general perception in the society, based on that survey that I had conducted, which I shared with you, is that many times, many organizations are not able to attract outstanding leaders, or people sitting at that position are perhaps not perceived to be outstanding academic leaders. Now, what is it that is inhibiting them? That's why it's important to know what are the excellence inhibitors. What comes in the way of in developing a great leadership skill is indifference. Indifference is, if you're, for example, if you're head of the institution, you're unconcerned, indifferent, laid back. Doesn't matter. Not sensitive to the people. It's very unlikely that you'll excel in your job. Lack of passion and zeal. Unless you're enthusiastic in managing, whatever you're managing, all leaders, whatever their role, they must reflect that passion and zeal. And later on, I don't know if I have that, I'll show you. I developed a formula when I was the first director of IT Roorkee, which indeed I fully used it for the transformation of that University of Roorkee into an IT Roorkee, because and that worked very well. And many times people like that formula. Basically, it's a way of conveying that in the mathematical form, because many times scientists and engineers like some degree of equation, but it's an equation to be seen in a notional sense to convey a point. And unless a leader has the passion and zeal and commitment to the organizational objective, you will not be able to achieve great excellence. So therefore, lack of commitment to the organizational objectives is an inhibitor in your progress. Lack of high performance teams. You are good. Yourself, you are wonderful. But you are not built around you. High performance teams. Many times, great leaders fail because of the teams that they have constituted around them. And many times, they do not constitute teams around them who are able to tell him the right path. Many times people believe in having a team who will simply see your mind. They'll do the mind mapping of the leader, what you want to hear, and they'll almost say exactly what you want them to say. That's not a high performance team. That's a pseudo team. Pseudo team is the feeling of a structure of a team, but primarily is unable to. And therefore, unless you create high performance team, HPT, around you, so not only that you yourself are outstanding in your own way, but you have an equally competent high performance team around you. It's very, very important. And lack of having that high performance team many a times is the cause for even a great, well-meaning academic leader not to perform, because he or she has not developed a high performance team around him or her. And finally, the negative attitude. If you have a negative attitude, perhaps you're unlikely to be a great leader. Attitude is the biggest single success factor in whatever you do at every level, for every job. Because if you have a positive attitude, you can find solutions to every problem. If you have a negative attitude, You'll find problems with every solution that people offer. But I mean, any great idea is a but. Now, therefore, as a result, to become a great leader and nurturing those academic leadership supply chain, it's important to keep these traits in mind. That people with positive attitudes were able to find optimism. That means if you are not part of the solution, then you are a problem. As a negative attitude, you only focus on problems. As a positive attitude, you focus on solutions. A leader has to find solutions to the problems, and therefore, if you have these attributes in your people, zeal, lack of commitment to organization objectives, lack of high performance teams, and negative attitudes, you are unlikely to be a great academic leader, and you are unlikely to nurture a great academic leadership team. So some of the characters, so those are inhibitors. That means traits which indeed come in the way of developing great leadership skill. But what are the positive characteristics of a good quality leader? Priority attentions to external internal customers. That means unless you are able to address your external customers, the significant others who are external to you, but they impact your performance, you can't ignore them. You say they are not part of my organization. They are called significant others. They're others, but they impact your performance in a big way. You can't ignore that constituency. And the internal customers are your students, your faculty, your staff. And therefore, your students, faculty, because in fact, sometimes you must have heard a classical statement when the concept of customer orientation was coming in. The customer is the king, customer first. In fact, that theory has now has undergone a change. And that is what has brought in the external and internal customers. Internal customers are your faculty, your staff, your people, your employees, your students. And unless your employees, your faculty are in the highest state of happiness and motivation, unmotivated, unhappy employees, unmotivated, unhappy faculty is unlikely to keep uppermost in mind the customer delight of students, delight of the delight of external society or employers. Therefore, you cannot have a great customer delight unless your employees, unless your faculty is also in the sense of delight, happiness. And therefore, a very good book, which indeed almost validates my point, which is that only delighted employees, only delighted faculty members would be able to delight students and the external customers, your employers and your society and parents. And hence, a disgruntled faculty might be a source of conflict in the organization and beyond. And hence, give personal attention to delight not only the external customers, their employers and society, the government, but also internal customers, your employees, your faculty, and your students. This is important. And if you do that, perhaps you'll find it will help you. Empowering and creating working environment for the subordinates. You empower them because everything cannot be micromanaged. And there are limits of micromanaging. And therefore, create a nurturing working environment and empower people. And therefore, the golden rule is very simple. Pick up the right team. Create a nurturing environment and empower them to perform. That's it. Nothing much needs to be done. And I've practiced it in wherever I've been in that role. Pick up the right people to be part of your team, create a nurturing environment, and empower them to perform. No micromanagement. Only intervene when the situation justifies the intervention. Don't expect in reporting at the end of the evening, what have you done today? That's not the kind of creating a great academic culture. Emphasize on improvement rather than maintenance. Focus should be that your trend, instead of in maintaining what performance you had last year, no, you must be better than last year. Next year, you might be better than next. And the trend of improvement is something that's critical. Balancing between preventing problems and developing better processes. For example, if you maintain status quo, you may say that I can prevent problems, but then you do not develop better processes. What you need to have, you have to maintain balance in finding out better and better solutions, which are faster, better, safer, cheaper. continuous improvement. It's called Kaizen in TQM, developing better, safer, cheaper, faster processes, incremental improvement. At the same time, prevent problems to performance to come. So preventive focus is the key. Anticipate a problem and prevent problems from happening. A stitch in time saves 9. Encouraging collaboration rather than competition. This is something which indeed is perhaps now gradually the situation is sinking in. In fact, many times what used to happen, since when I was the vice chancellor of UP Technical University, about 600 institutions in affiliated to that university. Many colleges would be so fiercely competing with the neighborhood college that they would not even send a competent faculty member to go to that college to do invigilation duty or go for being external examiner in their labs, because they said that if this faculty member goes to that college may pinch him or her. You may now, fearing that you may lose your faculty members, you prevent him going. Now that is addressing symptoms of a problem. Why should you fear if you're creating a right environment of work? If you're giving right compensation, you're treating people well, why should you fear that you'll be lost to someone else? Therefore, that competitive environment, cutthroat individualism and competition, even amongst colleges, amongst departments in the university, among departments in the college, in fact, must not be given too much. While competition helps you, but collaborative competition helps you. It's a new term, it's called collaborative competition or co-opetition. And the ideal example of a collaborative competition, the IIT system, where the 23 IITs jointly work in ensuring the basic policies of academic excellence through JEE or GATE or whatever. But amongst themselves, they fiercely compete to get the JEE rank number 1, JEE rank number 10 or 100. So amongst them, so you collaborate and compete. So collaborative competition is perhaps the new weapon of fighting, where it's a win-win proposition. So for example, if in a neighborhood we have colleges, find out, and fortunately our national academic and education policy permits that collaborative competition. We in fact advocates that. For example, if some outstanding teacher who has a subject expert in a neighborhood college, and you don't have such a teacher or such a subject expert with you, maybe allow your students to take credit from them. If some other college comes to you for getting their students to attend that subject and give them credit, you're collaborating, and it's a win-win proposition. And therefore, a great quality academic leadership in the current environment has to focus on collaborative competition, because focusing only on cutthroat individualism competition is unlikely to now deliver. Now, some of and as I mentioned, that I'll now share some of the initiative that I have taken, and then I'll leave the floor open for discussions, because I see some hands being raised. And as I mentioned in the beginning, that I'll be very happy to have a more interactive session after I complete my briefing. Now, these are some of the practices that your objective, if you want to find out a single objective for your organization, for example, your college, VJIT, if your college has to find a single purpose in which all the subordinate purposes subsumed into that is to meet or exceed your customers' expectations better than your competitors. Now, the meeting and exceeding your customers' expectations better than competitors is not cutthroat individualism. It may come through collaborative competition, but then your goal is to either meet or exceed. Find out the best in the class that you have. It's called role model approach or benchmarking. Find out who is the best college in your neighborhood and try to meet or exceed the customer expectations better than that college. And this is done by a very powerful technique in total quality management known as benchmarking. Benchmarking is identifying the best in the class, a role model, the most outstanding performer in that nature of business, and trying to emulate those practices. Benchmarking and trying to emulate those practices, and this is therefore benchmarking with the best practices. By emulating the best practices is called benchmarking. Now, I used that strategy as the director of IT Roorkee. I used this strategy in very quickly converting to the IT system, because I've been in the IT system for nearly 60 plus years now. For more than 60 years, without a break, I'm an ITN. I started my undergraduate BTech in Mechanical Engineering in IIT Kharagpur in 1962. Had my MTech from IIT Kharagpur in Industrial Engineering and Operation Research. I joined lecturer in IIT Delhi. I still remain there. And then obtained my PhD while working in 1974 from IIT Delhi. So in the whole process of being a part of the IT system for all those practices, and being a held those positions of deputy director, faculty, officiating director at IIT Delhi, dean, head, etc. I was aware of the best practices of various IITs. So when the the University of Roorkee became the 7th IIT of the country, this strategy brought in a major transformational role, because the systems and practices, the resources, the budget, although University of Roorkee itself was a great institution, and at times it was at par with the IT system. But then once it's a part of the IIT, IIT is synonymous to excellence. Therefore, in order to transform to a matching IIT member, I use this very powerful way, because if you start experimenting, find out the best practices in IIT Delhi. That's where I spend my lifetime. I'm still there. And trying to bring in those practices which have successfully delivered in IIT Delhi. For example, the Student Affairs Council, replacing the Student Union, the system of monitoring research and master's program. I was Dean Postgraduate Studies and Research, dealing with MTech and PhD programs. So many of the practices of the monitoring and evaluation of doctoral theses, etc., from IIT Delhi. Sponsored research and consulting, IIT Kharagpur was very large at that stage. So even the nomenclature of Dean Srik, in IIT Delhi had Dean IRD, in Kharagpur had Dean Srik, sponsored research and industrial consultancy. So we had Dean Srik, benchmark from IIT Kharagpur. The library of IIT Roorkee, the earlier library was, as you know, that there are space and resource constrained state libraries. But the IIT Roorkee library at one time became the most, amongst the IIT system, a futuristic library. So we found out which is the best library, IIT Kanpur and IIT Bombay. And like that, practices. So you benchmark with, but at the same time, and this is an important point that I wish to make, because many times the head of the institution coming from other colleges or other universities or other IITs make that mistake. You cannot transplant all the practices of an existing institution from where you are going to head another institution. No two situations are same. And this tendency to bring all that happened in IIT Delhi to IIT Roorkee would have failed. Because Roorkee itself is a great institution. University of Roorkee was a great institution. And so it was ensured that whichever is the best practices amongst IIT system, we try to emulate. Emulate means not blindly transplanting, adjusting, adapting to your own situation. As I stated in the beginning, situational theory of management says no two systems are same. So even Roorkee and Delhi are not same, although they are in close proximity. And therefore, as a result, adapt them to your situation. Essence, idea is the same, but adapting. So it's not adopting, it's adapting to that situation. Best practices. But whatever was great, Roorkee University has a great traditions, great practices, where in fact, and I can say with pride that were much better than some of the existing IITs then. So it was important to retain what was best there. If Roorkee University had the best practices, it must be retained. But if there are areas for improvement from other IITs, we can learn. Now, this was a policy which facilitated a very quick transformation during my tenure as the first director of VJIT Roorkee. And therefore, the technique that you could use as a leader, identify the best benchmark, identify the role model. It's your choice, the role model. And if you're the best in the class yourself, go higher up. Are you best in the zone? If you are the best in, let's say, Hyderabad, are you best in Telangana? You're best in Telangana. Are you best in the southern part of the country? Are you best in southern part of the country? Are you best in India? You keep on increasing, raise the bar, but keep on benchmarking with the best practices. It really works wonders for. But do not blindly transplant. I'm again cautioning that many people do that and burn their fingers. Don't blindly copy. You emulate the best practices, adapt them to your situation, and you'll find that you save time in unnecessary experimentation and you avoid unreasonable risk. And therefore, as a result, some of the issues that I did that as a lead by setting examples. For example, and say I'm narrating my experience. You may or may not like to, let me make it very, since I'm narrating my own experience, you have freedom not to choose it, ignore it altogether. So, but I believe in a good academic leader should lead by setting examples. So perhaps the very refreshing departure from convention. I started teaching there. I was director, but I was teaching in every semester a course, undergraduate, postgraduate, MBA, BTech, Mechanical Industrial Engineering, MBA, since I have that kind of a joint background. Guiding BTech projects, guiding MTech projects. I guided 2 PhDs while I was there. It was my first tenure. So an outreach, conducting number of continuing education programs. In fact, I still remember ACC Cement Company had, since I was conducting those programs when I'm here, and they said, wherever you go, we'll follow you. They came to Roorkee, and so therefore, I was a playing captain. I was teaching, I was guiding research, I was guiding BTech, I was guiding MTech, I was guiding PhD, I was conducting outreach, I was publishing papers. Now, if you're yourself doing it and yet you are able to lead the institution by things not waiting for your attention, create a good team, and your institution is progressing, that's leading by setting examples. And the good point here was that once you are yourself doing what you expect your faculty to do, because the role is that you are one among six. In a way, you are actually respecting and glorifying the teaching profession. That the uppermost in mind in you is the respect as a teacher. And it's by chance that you happen to be a director or a principal or a vice chancellor, but you are a teacher at heart. This is a major departure from academic leadership from the rest of it. And therefore, that helps. And the positive point of that strategy was that nobody ever complained, howso senior professor you may be, that you can't teach. You don't have enough load. There's so much of administrative work. I cannot teach. Offload me from teaching. Because if the head of the institution can do all this, why can't others? So therefore, in a way, you prevented those problems. It's a very powerful in a strategy that if leaders can follow. Encourage and reward excellence, like start for example, I don't know whether, since I must have given it. So I introduced what was perhaps for the first time in the IT system that I was aware of. Introduced a 360-degree faculty performance appraisal system in Roorkee. 360-degree performance appraisal system, very common to professionally managed companies, but not very common into the IT system then. It means that multiple stakeholders in self-assessment, student assessment, head assessment, dean assessment, and the top 5 peers, group of peers, and all based on facts and figures. Based on maybe I might have given that lecture earlier, or now therefore from there. Now this is very important point I'm saying for those who believe in punishing people. Of course, I said that's my style, and you don't have to follow that style. But I thought that I succeeded in that style, hence sharing my experience. That I believed in positive motivation of people who are performers. So based on a very objective, fair performance appraisal system, those who could achieve a score of 4.0 on a 5-point scale, on a 5 factors, academic teaching, teaching, learning process, academic research, sponsored research consulting, academic management, and outreach and recognition by others, rewards in me. Now, it's obviously on a 5-point Likert scale from low to high. It's very difficult for a person to score 4 on all the parameters. You may be a good teacher, but may not be a good researcher. You may be a good researcher, may not be a good teacher. And therefore, we decided that an attainable score of 4 was a reasonably. So what we did, all those people who performed in a year on this participative, objective, transparent performance appraisal system, we call them star performers. And the scheme is very popular. In fact, some of those people who been applied for position of directors in other ITs from Roorkee will say he was a star performer for this. So being a star performer became a recognition. Because after all, you cannot give any financial compensation, but then so these star performers were encouraged, and then this database became. Now this is important to developing academic supply chain. That if you have such an objective performance appraisal system, all those people who are star performers, they constitute your think tank. They are your star performance club, your think tank, and they can become an important contributors to your growth and development by involving them. So maybe that this became a basis for if anybody has been there's an assistant professor has been a star performer consistently for 4 to 5 years, that gets into the HR database, and such a person invariably, although this is a process of selection, there are experts from outside, and it's a competitive process. But being a star performer for 4 or 5 years is almost a very assured way of getting promoted to higher levels. Then, if you have been a star performer as a professor, and within your seniority and acceptability, and there are other criteria for that again I can share with you. How you choose your HOD, how do you choose your dean? Again, in a very fair, transparent, participative manner. Because unless your head is able to carry the department with you, unless your dean is able to carry the entire stakeholders of the university with you, you may not be able to achieve that. So how do you choose your HODs? But then they have to be star performance first. From your star performance, you choose your head. All those heads who have consistently, outstandingly performed their role as head, they become a potential candidate for your dean. All those people who have been outstanding deans became a potential candidate for being chosen as the director or the principal or the vice chancellor. So this way you develop nurture an academic leadership team coming from a factual basis where accomplished track record, and therefore the faculty performance staff appraisal which is participative. But then what was important in it? It's important message for those who indeed are that while I encouraged, admired, adored the star performers through positive motivation, I did not threaten or punish relatively less performers. People who are, in fact, in every organization there are a wide spectrum of people performing very well, performing not so well, and sometimes maybe a couple of people who are not performing even at acceptable level. So even those people who are not performing at an acceptable level don't. There are limitations of taking punitive action, in particular in a government organization. So the idea is to handhold and nurture them, inspire them. So instead of punishing them or threatening them with the letters, I would simply say this was your score. You scored 2.0 on a 5-point scale. So it's good to share that performance in an open, transparent manner. But that's it. And he says the director's office would be, I'll be delighted to help you and give any help and assistance that you require from me to make you develop and realize your hidden potential. That's it. No threat. So it's called positive motivation. Encourage, reward the performers, but don't threaten the non-performers. Find out the reasons for their non-performance. It's also very popularly known as management by objectives. Find out the reasons why they're not performing. There are 2 reasons possible. One is that lack of capability. Then they are the candidates for faculty development. The lack of willingness to perform. maybe that they develop a negative attitude that they may have been shortchanged in life earlier, their due was not given to them, and they would try to nurture them by bringing their negativity into positive domain. And I'm sure that people would grow and develop. That's why in the first year there were only 44 star performers. When I left, there were 88 star performers from the same catchment area. So nurturing, developing your own people gradually towards achieving excellence is a way that indeed can do well. And of course, involving stockholders in a shared vision with excellence. Now, this is an equation that I use again for purely psychological reasons, because as scientists and engineers, we somehow get enamored by equations and numbers. Now, this is a very famous Einsteinian equation, E is equal to mc square. The only thing in this equation, for me, E was excellence. That is the role of an IT system. Many times, IT system is synonymous to excellence, and this should be the goal of any academic institution anyway. So, with that academic excellence, E is m into C square, where M is motivation. Motivation is putting efforts to do what you wish to do. Commitment is the sincerity and passion and zeal with which you do that. So this equation said E is equal to mc square, means excellence is motivation into commitment square. Now the takeaway from this equation was that if you really want to excel in life, excel as a principal, excel as a dean, excel as a head, excel as a lecturer, excel as a professor, whatever you do, excel as an employee, excel as a student. It's a very generic equation. Commitment is a major differentiator. If you do a job half-heartedly, C is equal to 0.5, literally half-hearted. You are doing a job half-heartedly because you're forced to do that job. You are teaching because you're forced to do teaching. You don't enjoy teaching, you're forced to do that teaching. If you're studying, you're forced to study because you don't like the subject, you don't like the so anything that you do half-heartedly, with lack of enthusiasm, with laid-back approach, with indifference, your C becomes 0.5, E becomes 1/4 with the same motivation. You're doing the same job, but you're doing the job half-heartedly. You're doing the same course, but you're studying, attending that same class, but attending it half-heartedly. But if you're doubly enthused, C becomes 2. You have the passion and zeal. You're absolutely greatly enthused in what you're doing with the same motivation you've achieved for, which means that an important takeaway from this equation was that we really want to excel as an institution. Each and every employee, each and every student, each and every faculty must get inspired by this equation in the sense that you have to be absolutely outstanding, passionate and zeal. You have the zeal and enthusiasm, because and the corollary of this is that excellence and indifference cannot coexist. If you're indifferent in doing what you're doing, you're an indifferent teacher, if you're indifferent principal, you're indifferent dean, if you're indifferent head, unconcerned, laid back, unenthusiastic, unmotivated, uncommitted, then excellence will not come. This indeed can be a major, it did. And therefore, we require mission, vision, objectives, and goals that inspire, systems and technology to support those goals, people to achieve goals through team and individual excellence, organization culture and core values to nurture that excellence, performance measures that are excellence driven, participative and credible, leadership known for sincerity, integrity, and values perceived and accepted by the led. Now it's called the acceptance theory of leadership. Unless your people, unless your faculty, unless you're a staff, unless your students accept you wholeheartedly as your leader, as their leader, you may not perform so well. Therefore, try to create that larger area of influence of leadership so that people who are accepted by the led easily, genuinely, voluntarily tend to be more effective leader than those leaders who are forced down the unwilling subordinates. And create a learning organization, an organization which doesn't. An educational system is a knowledge organization. Knowledge becomes outdated very, very quickly, and almost every 2 years the knowledge redoubles. And therefore, as a result, continuous create a learning organization where newer knowledge is continuously. So each one of us, including the leader, has to be constantly learning, relearning, unlearning, and this makes a difference. Then succeed in creating the right environment, stimulate innovation and individual creativity, open information, easy communication together bring a change, disciplined execution and razor sharp focus on business. Now, policies are as good as implemented, and you use technology to use an enabler for excellence. And the important thing is uh, uh, creating teamwork. Now, team is an acronym. Together, everyone achieves more. So if you know as a departmental head, if your people, your faculty in the department work together as a team, or in a section in production engineering, mechanical engineering, or in thermal engineering, together the moment you create a team culture, indeed can be superb. The moment you create a team with academia and industry, you're together, industry and academia interaction would be a win-win proposition. Which is an operating necessity in a current globally competitive business environment. And therefore, if industry and academia together realize that teamwork is in the interest of both, so teamwork is an extremely important. Then some of things that I talked about: clear vision, SWOT analysis. SWOT analysis is a very powerful tool. Now, SWOT analysis is knowing your strengths and weaknesses, and identifying the opportunities and threats in the external environment. Now, strengths and weaknesses are historical. If you look back in the last 10 years, how well have you performed? So conduct your strength and weakness analysis with historical and opportunities and threats are futuristic. And therefore, SWOT analysis can be a very powerful tool for a manager, for a leader, for a director, for a vice chancellor to create right strategies for future growth. So we developed SWOT analysis, clear vision, communication with all stakeholders, and faculty performance appraisal system that I talked about, playing captain model that I talked about, democratic systems of decision making, freedom of expression, but collective wisdom to prevail. For example, in Senate is an IT system. There are all professors are ex officio members of the Senate. So sometimes the Senate has 110 members, 150 members. So having and as director, you are chairman of the Senate or academic council in university, you call them. The democratic processes, systems of decision making would extremely successfully perform. Of course, as the chairman, it's your job to steer the discussion in a right direction, but permit people to express themselves. Freedom of expression of the members of the Senate, but finally, when it comes to decision making, collective wisdom to prevail. So while people are free to express themselves, but nobody can hijack the agenda item or jam it, not allow the decisions to be taken. That's not a great leadership. Permit people to express themselves, but collective wisdom must be finally to prevail. At best, people might, if they're very, if they're very strongly feeling against the decision being collectively taken, they should have freedom to express their dissent note, but they cannot hijack the discussion. And therefore, this actually can work very well. Benchmarking with the other ITs I talked about, holistic development, focus not only on infrastructure. Many times you only focus on buildings, but not only buildings, faculty, academic processes, academic strategies, and the best practices, and strategic planning group. A strategic planning group is very important for a leader to succeed, where you develop a strategic planning group coming from very top sincere people, professors, and develop a model of budgetary allocation based on activity-based budgeting, positive motivation that I talked about already, innovative practices. Perhaps in 2002, at least this was not happening in IIT Delhi, where I was deputy director of faculty. As you know that in IT system, we take many times faculty members from outside India. And normally at that time, although it's about 20 years back I'm talking of, we used to select faculty members based on their biodata. Is called selection in absentia. So we don't meet that person and look at his biodata. And these experts look at the biodata and they select him in absentia. It used to happen very common. We came across some difficulties in IIT Delhi. We found that sometimes people on paper look very strong, or the Pedigree is very strong. They are from, PhD from Stanford, MIT, etc., from Harvard, Cambridge, Oxford. It impresses you. Biodata looks great. But when you look at a person personally, when interacting in 15, 20, half an hour interview, perhaps can be a very important confirmatory test. So what we introduced as a very innovative practice, now it's a very common tool everywhere, not only in IITs, even in every college now we do it. And Corona, COVID-19 made it almost a new normal that every faculty selections you even within India hold. But we started that Skype-based interviews of foreign candidates instead of selecting them in absentia, and then burn your fingers. Sometimes their biodata look good, but a person cannot even speak properly. His communication is very weak, or he is a very angular personality profile and very negative in perception, fights with everyone. And a great biodata may not be of much use, because as attitude, as I mentioned, is a critical success factor, positive attitude. When you look at a person interact for 15, 20, 30 minutes, biodata is anyway with you. So we introduced that innovative practice at that time, which is now a new normal even everywhere. Skype-based interviews of foreign candidates. Although the same expert committee would look at those candidates, maybe the time zones were different, because when it's night here and the day there in US, which is the primary catchment area. Therefore, these experts would interact with that candidate through Skype, so that they not only know the biodata, they also know the personality profile, interaction, the way you are, the face, the gesture, the body language, and all that goes with it. And therefore, quality of selection perhaps improved a bit by using and so enabling technology to improve the quality of decisions you make in. Then do not ignore criticism. Involve them to a part of the process. In fact, many times what happens that there are in every organization there are some people who are born critic. They will criticize almost anything that you do. Normal tendency of any director or principal or vice chancellor is to avoid them. Don't have them as don't involve them in anything. They become more critical subsequently, and eventually that compounding factor works tremendously on them. They'll always be first reaction will be too critical. My own personal experience had been, if people were good, that means I said they were performing their job very well. I mean, they were outstanding teachers. They were getting outstanding student feedback. They're publishing good papers, but were frank in expressing their opinion before the director or a principal. They will tell the truth, even if it looks uncomfortable or not very pleasant. Many times, and this is very powerful, those of you may be interested in this trick. Of course, I might have made mistakes. In the part, I did trust some people whom perhaps did not live up to that trust or could not change their mindset. But these are part of the game. As I said, you have to take calculated, but many improvements will take place. For example, involve them. First is allow them to express them fully in Senate meetings. Allow them to express fully in faculty board meetings. Express their point of view. Of course, there are ways of decency. You cannot express in decency has to be an operating doctrine. Express your point of view in a parliamentary language with in a decent manner, but feel free to disagree with the boss. Many times we ignore such people who disagree with the boss, but they may be people who really are well-meaning in their criticism. And if these people are involved and their criticism is listened to, they may give a timely wake-up call so that you can avoid facing a catastrophe later on. Because if all the people around you are saying yes, 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 sir, yes, sir, yes, sir, many times you may not be knowing the ground reality, and these people can be a powerful information giver or sincere in telling you that you are not on the right path. So do not ignore such critics, well-meaning critics, critics who are accomplished themselves. They're performers, but they are not conformist, simply blindly say whatever the boss says. Because if you blindly agree with what the boss says, then you are not required. There should be somebody to say the other viewpoint. And therefore, normally tendencies to ignore such people. They're capable people. They may have a point of view, And if they are in the minority, as I already mentioned, they may not be allowed to hijack the issue, but express, listen to them carefully. And if there's some good point in their criticism, it must be incorporated, because in a generic sense, every weakness pointed out is an agenda for improvement. Many times there's a tendency in us to put the weakness under the carpet. That's not going to work. Every weakness pointed out by Curtis is a potential agenda for improvement. So take every weakness as an opportunity, take every criticism as an opportunity, and if it is sort of biased criticism, or there's a personal hidden agenda, ignore it. So I'm only saying that not all criticism are ill-founded. There could be some constructive criticism. Involve these people. Maybe that if you involve them in whatever role, they will also become, I've seen it happening in some of those people, their own behavior improved very substantially, because they became cynical, because despite their capability, perhaps they were not getting the kind of involvement and role to play as was expected. Healthy sense of competition among society, already talked about, and you have those their department, faculty board, deans committee, senate, and board of governors. This I already, and this is where I think is I'm coming to a conclusion. Transforming education institutions and learning organizations, leadership role. Develop a culture of shared vision among students, teachers. Unless your vision is shared by everyone, you won't realize it. Don't overemphasize competition, promote cooperation. Faculty and staff to join together. Have a culture of proactiveness. Be proactive and not reactive. Faculty, students, and administrators think of all educational processes, activities, and interaction with the environment as part of the system of interrelated. Everything is interrelated. Now, this is where I thought I'll share my basic points, and now I will perhaps stop sharing, and would be happy to respond to any comments, session that you may like to have.
Sir, we have Mr. Sanjay Puri, who has raised his hand. I will allow him to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sanjay Puri, sir, maybe you can unmute yourself and talk. Mr. Sanjay Puri, or we have Dr. Sharon. Yeah, Sanjay Pujari. Sanjay Pujari, sorry, Sanjay Pujari. And Dr. Sharana also. We have Miss Sujata. They can unmute themselves and speak.
Okay, it seems that either they are not able to hear you, or they perhaps got the answer to their query and no longer interested in raising their hand. But if there are any comments received in the chat box, there's another way of interactive session. If there are any comments in the chat box, you can as well raise them. Otherwise, that's the end of it. Absolutely.
There was one question, sir. I'm just trying to raise, read that question. It is a question asking like the heads do not are very partial with their attitude towards faculty and ignore others, or he is unable to see, he or she is unable to see the potential in others. So how do we deal with this? Is the question by Ms. Indu.
Yeah, that's true. I was addressing the leadership begins from head, dean, deputy director, vice chancellor, full chancellor, to vice chancellor. Now, if the head is partial to someone, does not find merit in someone else, that means that he does not have that fairness that is expected of any the head of the department. Once you're head of the department, I often used to say, and I've practiced that way. Many times what happens that the head, once you become a head, you do not come out of your subgroup. You suppose you are in production engineering or thermal engineering. I'm taking a mechanical engineering example where I located myself. Now, as a head, you belong to the entire department. So balanced growth, balanced development of the entire department and not merely a thermal group or design group or production group or industrial group. So as a head, you have to come beyond beyond your own narrow specialization. Similarly, as a principal, if you're coming from internal, you're a head of chemical engineering and you become principal. You're no longer relevant to that chemical engineering. To every department of the university or a college is your baby, and therefore, first and important characteristics of the head should be you must be fair. In fact, as I mentioned, all the traits of leadership that I mentioned, if these are not present in the head, perhaps such a head may not succeed as a head, may not be able to inspire people, and may not be inspire performance. And therefore, if you have heads of that kind, now therefore, question arises: how did such a person become head? This is the role that a principal have to exercise themselves. Now, I'll tell you how I appointed heads in University of Roorkee. For example, as you know, there's a rotational headship for 3 years. The headship is for a period of 3 years. Sometimes in IT Delhi, it's for 2 years, renewable for another 2 years maximum. It's a rotational headship, and the very fact headship is rotational leadership means that it's an additional role that every professor has to perform. It's not a permanent headship. It has very positive points in it. So while you choose your head, you'll see, all right, well, when the current head's tenure is coming to an end, I'll write as a individual personal confidential letter to each faculty member of the department. Each faculty member of the department. A personal letter, but then confidential in the sense that nobody else would know whom you mentioned your choice. And a director has to have a trust in faculty, have to have a trust in the director that once I give that commitment to them in writing, they would have trust in it that nobody else would know what your opinion was about the next head. So I'll write an individual letter to every head, every faculty of the department, big departments and so on, that since such and such person is completing his tenure, we need to find a new head as a part of the rotational policy. Then I'll write down a paragraph what a good head should be. All these things that I talked about in leadership traits here, I'll write down in a paragraph what a good head of department should be. Same thing I would be doing for deans and other things, but then let me now narrate headship since you mentioned headship. So I say a good head of department should be a good academic leader in the sense that his own academic profile is great. He's a good teacher. He's a good researcher. He's a good person. He's positive attitude. He's able to take everybody. He's a team player. He's perceived to be fair and good. So I'll narrate all the traits of a good HOD. And then I read the next para. In the light of these, I would be very happy if you let me know. This called, in fact, you are guiding at the same time giving a choice. This guided choice is important because if I give it free, anybody, even an assistant professor will apply for headship. Okay, he'll make his friend. You'll see, from amongst the 2 or 3 senior most professors who have not been head so far, please let me know your preference out of 2 or 3 senior most professors who have not yet been head. And if there are not senior most professors in the department, 2 or 3 senior most associate professors who have not been head so far, and let me know your choice. And then I'll assure you that and send your choice in a letter personally addressed to by my name, which will be opened only by me, strictly confidential. And I assure you that nobody else would ever know what your choice was. And the trust was there. Believe me that nearly 100% people participated in that process, gave their opinion. Since it's a guided choice, that out of the 2 or 3 remain the senior most professor. So you're not even ignoring seniority. But maybe the senior most person may not be able to have, as I mentioned that in the beginning, a leadership role is very different from a teaching role alone. Maybe senior most person is very good in academician, but he is not able to take people along, or people don't perceive him to be fair, or so you give us some limited choice, 2 or 3, and I found invariably the people who eventually uh, became a preferred candidate for the headship were appointed and they succeeded. Then I'll destroy the entire thing. Uh, all these information, I did not keep them because it's a personal thing, and there was a trust that the right choice will be made. Same thing I used to do with dean. People have succeeded as an outstanding heads. So you'll see the deanship is over. People who must have been acted as a head of the department in the past. So that this is a way of nurturing supply chain, as the topic was, that you are picking up your heads from the professors, or who must have been section in charges, lab in charges, group in charges, etc. There was again a limit, and gradually from successful heads to the successful to the deans, from successful deans to the principal or a director of the vice chancellor. This is how you nurture, and it perhaps did wonders. Now, in order to further elucidate this point, and which in IT Delhi had that scheme earlier, pick up that in IT Delhi, when I joined, the normal tenure of a head was for 3 years, but the announcement used to be year after year. Now, usme advantage there was a mid course correction pass. Suppose you appointed somebody with a good intention as HOD, but he or she is not able to carry the department together, is not perceived to be fair and open, transparent, or not able to deliver performance. They built in system without insulting him or her. At the end of the year, since the appointment letter is only for a year, you renew it for the next year, again renew it for the next year. But if suppose the going is tough, maybe after 1 year and only to my knowledge, only once in the entire lifetime that I was in there, only once a head had to be changed after 1 year. But once again, you're not sacking. The original notification was only for 1 year. And every year renewal is automatic so long as things are performing. So there are ways to appoint right people. And if such a person is not able to demonstrate that he is able to take the entire department, is not perceived to be fair, but this has to be collective opinion about him, not an individual person. Individual opinion may not be able to govern our entire decisions. Collective wisdom should prevail, and therefore this should be possible to even take care. That's great. I hope I have responded to the question.
Shall I go to the next question, sir?
Please, yeah, please, I'm there.
This is from Srifani Kishore Devineni. The students we get in our college are academically very poor. Trying to do sincerely educate them is often complained as high standards teaching. This is often a problem in colleges and universities.
That's true. That's true.
Often mediocrity is given upper hand. So how do we deal with this?
No, this is true. This is true because you see, if I begin, 4 parameters of success was quality of faculty, teaching learning process, quality of academic leadership, and quality of students. If the students' quality is very, very weak, even a good teacher would find it very difficult to inspire such a student. For that, there are 2 ways to look at it. If you look at it as a challenge, the challenge is that the input quality was weak, which means that it requires a greater degree of commitment and sincerity and efforts on the part of teacher to make him shine. Then the rewards of such a teacher are great. If we are converting an ordinary person to an outstanding student, then your contribution to the national development process is much higher than some of the IITs where you take a brilliant person. So if you take your job as a challenge to nurture a weak student into outstanding student, all that it requires is a greater degree of sincerity, commitment, and passion on the part of the teacher. But the rewards of such a recognition are superb. That's one way to look at it. An alternative way of, which is relatively indifferent way of looking at it, is that you can't make a chalk, you can't polish a chalk to make a diamond out of him or her. Therefore, if the input quality is weak, don't expect that output quality to be as good as that of the IIT. But then it is the value gain. How much have you been able to add to value in his employability? How much employability gain you have been able to give, and be reconciled to that? At least I've been able to add 10%, 15% value to this person. So there is definitely some value addition. Be happy with the value addition that you've done, and your objective would be to maximize the value addition, and be happy with it. But then once you have taken him as a student, this becomes your obligation to improve him. Because as I said, they are our very purpose for us to be there. And find out there is challenging, but maybe it's but the rewards are enormous if you succeed. Only problem arises, which in many private colleges, when the number of such students is huge. So if you have only few weak students, a teacher can give personal attention to them. But if you have hundreds of them in the class, and the class size runs into hundreds, then it's a humanly difficult for a teacher. So there, perhaps the institution must revisit the manner in which you're hiring our students and the number in which you're hiring, because large number of lower quality students being hired is not designed for excellence. No way. That's where the policy of the top management makes a difference. The vision. Are you going for numbers? Or are you going for quality? A balance, a fine balance is required. Okay.
So as the time is running out, maybe I will read out the last question. This is from Mr. Srinivasan. Should students be considered as customers? I have always believed that it is the parents who are customers. Students are only raw material to be transformed.
I have understood the question. Actually, if I'm there in this business for 55 years, you know that such questions must have been asked earlier as well. Now, students are a peculiar case. They are our customers as well as our product. Our ultimate, and which I made in the beginning, our ultimate customers are the employers and the society and parents. You're not parents, society, employers, where we are using. So ultimate customers are the society and employers and parents, but our immediate customers are our students, immediate customer, but they are not customer in the conventional sense. They are also our product. And this is right that they are our raw material. And it's a raw material we need to nurture. And therefore, it's a very peculiar situation in case of students. So do not take a student in a conventional customer sense, because customer is the king. And the student says, okay, no classes together today because I'm the king. Not to. They are your customers in the sense that they should be the purpose of your attention to them, only to that limit. You should be concerned about them. They should be focused on them, but they are your products as well. They are the products who need to be nurtured and to become outstanding product. And therefore, the right approach to them would be, they are your customer to the limited extent of getting the purpose of your attention, but they are product which needs to be nurtured and honed. Best perhaps the way they need to take care. And regarding feedback, in fact, student feedback is a very dicey term. Maybe if I don't know whether I spoke here. Sometimes do not go for student feedback with take them with a pinch of salt. Sometimes it could be a trade-off. You give me A grade, I'll give you A grade. You give me C grade, I'll give you C grade. You give me D grade, you fail me, I'll fail you. So this is a limited role. Don't go by individual opinion. Go by the average value. Again, so student feedback has a role, but not to use it as a sole criterion of performance appraisal. Indeed, in my current university, we have student feedback. Out of 45 marks we give on teaching, only 7 marks are given for student feedback. That's all. And therefore, could be a variety of reasons for. So, a teacher should never compromise with the values and ethics in the name of getting student feedback. Student feedback itself should be very fair, transparent, and objective. But this is true that they are not our customer like conventional customers. This was their immediate customer in a limited sense of requiring our attention, but they are our products, which indeed would make us, if we shine them, they'll make us proud. That's the way I look at it. Okay. Any other observation? Okay. Srina?
Yeah, we can, I think, wind up, sir. So thank you very much, sir, for this excellent, eloquent, and articulation on the development and nurturing of academic leadership. Your experience sharing today on influencing and influencing other academicians in the spectrum of institutional leadership down the chain is with people who have the desire to perform, to grow, to be leaders and achieve objectives and goals of the institution was extremely informative and also empowering us to be self-driven in striving towards self and organizational excellence. Sir, you were like leading by setting example. You have walked the show and you are truly an inspiration to all of us, sir. Your burning desire to continue teaching still fresh from the past 55 years, which is a core value to be learned by all of us, sir. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very
valuable
much. Thank you very much.
Knowledge sharing also.
Thank you, Srijay, and thank
you, sir.
Sujata. And thank you all the participants. I wish you all the best. And Happy New Year for all of you that are participating. Best wishes for the New Year to all of you.
Sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Great. Thank you. I'll now say,
yeah, we can leave the session, sir.